The great chamber of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were made of dark stone, brought from a dozen dead worlds. Every species that entered this room understood the same message. You are nothing compared to the power gathered here on this day. Representatives from 47 civilizations sat in their designated places. Some breathed oxygen. Others breathed methane or ammonia. A few did not breathe at all. They had gathered to witness what they believed would be a simple matter. The young species called humanity would finally accept its place in the galaxy. Ambassador. Park Do-Yan walked into the chamber alone. He was not a tall man. His hair was gray at the temples, and he wore simple glasses that he adjusted often. His suit was plain and dark, without any medals or decorations. He carried only a small tablet and a thermos of tea from home. The aliens watched him with mixtures of pity and amusement. Humanity had joined the Galactic Federation only 30 years ago. In cosmic terms, they were infants. Their technology was crude. Their fleet was tiny. And now, the mighty Velker Dominion had demanded their outer colonies as tribute. Everyone knew how this would end. Supreme. Commander Thrax of the Velker Dominion stood at the center of the chamber. He was terrifying to look at. His body was covered in black armor that had grown from his own bones. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel. His face had no eyes, only a cluster of sensors that glowed red in the dim light. "The human arrives," Thrax announced. His voice was like stones grinding together. "Finally, we may proceed." Do-Yan bowed politely to the assembly. He found his designated spot, a small platform barely large enough for one person, and stood with his hands folded in front of him. "Thank you for receiving me," he said. His voice was soft but clear. "I apologize for any delay." Elder Prism, the representative of the Rillian Collective, leaned forward. Prism was a being made entirely of living crystal, and light bent strangely around their body. They were old, even by galactic standards, and had seen many young species come and go. Ambassador Park, Prism said, "The Council has reviewed the situation. The Velker Dominion has made claims to your outer colonies. They possess the military strength to enforce these claims. We have called you here to discuss terms of peaceful transition." Do-Yan nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. "I see. And what terms does the Council suggest?" Thrax stepped forward before Prism could answer. "The terms are simple. Human. You will surrender your colonies. You will pay tribute to the Dominion. You will accept Velker governance over your outer systems. In exchange, we will not burn your homeworld to ash." The chamber was silent. Several delegates looked away, uncomfortable with the bluntness, but unwilling to challenge it. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong took from the weak. It had always been this way. Do-Yan reached into his pocket and pulled out a cloth. He cleaned his glasses slowly, taking his time. The gesture seemed almost rude in its casualness. "I appreciate the Council's concern for our well-being," he said finally, "and I thank Supreme Commander Thrax for being so direct. However, I believe there has been a misunderstanding." Thrax's sensors flickered. "What misunderstanding?" "We are not here to discuss surrender." Do-Yan put his glasses back on and smiled. It was a gentle smile, the kind a teacher might give to a confused student. "We are here to inform the Council that if the Velker Dominion proceeds with its planned invasion, we are fully prepared to defend ourselves." For a moment nothing happened. Then laughter erupted from several parts of the chamber. A massive, slug-like being from the consortium of traitors shook with amusement. Even Elder Prism's crystalline form seemed to flicker with what might have been surprise. Thrax did not laugh. His claws opened and closed slowly. "You are prepared," he repeated. "You have 47 combat vessels. We have 12,000. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your soldiers have never fought a real war. What exactly are you prepared to do?" Do-Yan poured himself a cup of tea from his thermos. The action was so ordinary, so human, that it seemed absurd in this setting. He took a small sip and nodded in satisfaction. "Everything necessary," he said simply. The laughter died away. Something in the human's voice had changed. It was still soft, still polite, but there was something beneath it now. Something cold and patient and very, very old. High Counselor Vex, a being of pure energy contained in a mechanical shell, spoke for the first time. Ambassador Park, we understand that humanity is proud, but pride will not stop Velker weapons. We urge you to reconsider. Accept reasonable terms now, and your species will survive. Doyen turned to face Vex directly. High Counselor, with respect, I do not think you understand humanity very well. We have been fighting wars since before we could write. We have killed more of our own kind than many species have individuals. We have burned our own cities, poisoned our own lands, and still we survived. Still, we grew. He paused to take another sip of tea. 30 years ago, when we first made contact with the galaxy, we saw how things worked here. The strong prey on the weak. The powerful take what they want. We understood this system immediately because it was the same system we had lived under for thousands of years. Thrax's claws twitched. Then you understand that you must submit, Nodoyan said. We understood that someone would eventually come for us. We understood that we would need to be ready. He smiled again, and this time, there was no warmth in it at all. We are ready, Supreme Commander. We have been ready for a very long time. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of translation devices seemed to fade. Elder Prism spoke carefully. Ambassador, are you saying that humanity has been preparing for this conflict since first contact? I am saying, Do-Yan replied, that humanity has been preparing for conflict since before we left our homeworld. It is, unfortunately, what we do best. He finished his tea and placed the cup back on top of his thermos. So I will ask the Council one more time, very clearly. Does the Velker Dominion truly wish to go to war with humanity? Thrax rose to his full height, towering over the small human. We do not fear you, Ambassador. In 12 hours, our fleet will jump to your space. Your colonies will fall. Your people will learn their place. Doyon nodded slowly. Very well. Then I have done my duty. I have warned you. He turned to address the full council. Remember this moment, honored representatives. Remember that we offered peace, and peace was refused. He picked up his thermos and his tablet, bowed once more to the assembly, and began to walk toward the exit. Where are you going? Thrax demanded. Doyan paused at the door and looked back over his shoulder. He said, I have a war to win. 12,000 light-years away from the council chamber. Admiral Kang Suni stood in the heart of Earth's Global Defense Center. The room was buried deep beneath a mountain range, protected by layers of rock and metal and energy shields that had been built in secret over 2 decades around her. Hundreds of officers worked at their stations. Screens covered every wall, showing maps of human space, fleet positions, and enemy movements. The room hummed with quiet tension, like a bow pulled back and ready to release. Suni was 61 years old. Her hair was cut short and practical, and her uniform was simple. She had served in the military for 40 years, rising through the ranks not through politics but through pure competence. Every officer in the room would follow her into hell if she asked them to. The ambassador has left the council chamber, reported Lieutenant Commander O'Mara from her station. His signal is clear. The Velker refused to back down. Suni nodded. She had expected this. They all had. Begin Phase 1 activation, she ordered. Send the signal to all sectors. Across human space, encrypted messages began to travel. They reached mining stations and farming colonies. They reached research outposts and trade hubs. They reached every place where humans lived and worked among the stars. On the colony world of New Busan, Lieutenant Han Jiang received the signal while she was eating dinner with her family. She was 26 years old, born on this planet, raised under its pale blue sun. She had trained for this moment since she was 16. Her father looked up from his meal. He was a farmer, his hands rough from working the soil of an alien world. But he understood immediately. It's time. He asked. Ji Young nodded. She kissed her mother on the cheek and hugged her younger brother. Get to the shelter, she told them. You know the way. Stay there until I come for you. Then she was running, her boots pounding against the packed earth of the colony streets. Around her, other young people were doing the same. They had grown up together, played together, trained together. Now they would fight together. The armory was hidden beneath the town's community center. Guiyang entered her code and descended into the underground facility. Rows of weapons lined the walls. Combat suits hung in neat lines. Everything was maintained perfectly, inspected monthly for the past 10 years. "All units report in," she said into her communicator. One by one, her squad answered. They were farmers' children and teachers' children. They had never seen real combat. But they knew their equipment, knew their positions, and knew what they were fighting for. Back on Earth, General Yun Taisik joined Admiral Kong at the Central Command Station. He was a large man with a calm face and steady hands. He had overseen the construction of humanity's hidden defenses for the past 15 years. "Status report," Kong said. "All planetary defense grids are coming online," Taisik replied. "Estimated full activation in 4 hours. Hidden fleet elements are moving to staging positions. Ground forces are mobilizing on all colony worlds." Kong studied the display in front of her. Red dots marked the gathering Velker fleet. Blue dots marked humanity's forces. The red outnumbered the blue significantly, but numbers were not everything. "Show me the defense platforms," she ordered. The display shifted. Suddenly, thousands of new markers appeared across human space. They were on moons and asteroids. They were on space stations that the galaxy thought were civilian. They were in debris fields that everyone had assumed were worthless. 8,412 platforms, Taisik said, each one equipped with kinetic accelerators and point defense systems. The Velker have no idea they exist. And the fleet. 473 combat vessels, hidden in hollowed-out asteroids and disguised as mining ships. They're ready to deploy on your command. Kong allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy thought humanity had 47 ships. The galaxy was wrong. In a different part of the defense center. Captain Beek Yongji reviewed the ground defense plans for Inchin Station, a major hub in the outer colonies. She was 34 years old, a veteran of several small conflicts and countless training exercises. Her soldiers respected her because she never asked them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. "The Velker will probably land here and here," she said, pointing to a holographic map. "They'll expect minimal resistance. They'll expect civilians to surrender." Her sergeant, a man named Quan Dong-su, nodded grimly. "They'll be surprised. That's the idea." Yunji zoomed in on the station's layout. Every corridor has been prepared. Hidden compartments, remote-controlled defenses, fallback positions. We can make them bleed for every meter. She looked at her soldiers, young men and women who had never seen real war. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. "Listen to me," she said quietly. "The Velker think we're weak. They think we're afraid. They think they can take our homes without a fight." She paused. "They are wrong. We have been preparing for this day since before you were born. Every drill, every exercise, every hour of training has led to this moment, and we will not fail." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Farmers were becoming soldiers. Teachers were becoming medics. Engineers were becoming weapons operators. The entire species was transforming, revealing its true nature. Ambassador Park Do-young was still traveling home when his communicator buzzed. It was Admiral Kong. "Ambassador," she said. "Did they believe you?" Doyen smiled tiredly. He was old for this kind of work. His bones ached from the stress of the council meeting, but his mind was as sharp as ever. "They believe I am a fool," he replied. "They believe humanity is bluffing. They will attack as planned." "Good." Kong's voice was cold and professional. "Everything is proceeding. The defenses will be fully activated before they arrive." Do-yan looked out the window of his shuttle at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was preparing to destroy his people. They did not know what they were about to face. "Admiral," he said, "I have spent my life studying history. Every empire that has ever risen has eventually fallen, usually because they underestimated an enemy. They saw what they expected to see, not what was actually there. And the Velker. The Velker C-47 ships, in a species that has never fought a major war? Doyen closed his eyes. They do not see thousands of years of conflict. They do not see the Roman legions or the Mongol hordes or the armies of the world wars. They do not see what humanity truly is. And what are we, Ambassador? Doyen thought about the question for a long moment. We are survivors, he said finally. We have survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have destroyed us. We have survived each other, which is the hardest thing of all. And we will survive this. The shuttle carried him onward through the darkness of space, toward a homeworld that was ready for war in the defense center. Admiral Kang ended the call and turned back to her officers. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Let's show them what we can do. The room erupted into organized activity. Orders were sent. Ships began to move. Weapon systems came online. The trap was set. Humanity was ready. The Velker fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal insects. 12,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Supreme Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, watching the human colony world of New Busan grow larger on his display. Pathetic, he said. No defensive fleet. No orbital platforms. They are not even trying to resist. His second-in-command, a scarred warrior named Krax, clicked his mandibles in agreement. The humans are cowards. This will be over before the day ends. Thrax had already planned the invasion. First, they would destroy any orbital infrastructure. Then, they would land troops and take control of the population centers. Finally, they would move to the next colony and repeat the process. Within a week, all of humanity's outer territories would belong to the Dominion. Begin the assault, he ordered. The first wave of Velker ships accelerated toward New Busan. They were heavy cruisers, designed to overwhelm planetary defenses with sheer firepower. Their crews were confident, even bored. This was routine for them. They had conquered dozens of species this way. The cruisers were halfway to the planet when the first moon exploded. No. Not exploded, transformed. The rocky surface cracked open, revealing massive metal structures beneath. Thousands of weapon ports opened. Energy began to build. What is that? Krax demanded before anyone could answer. The moon fired. Kinetic rounds the size of buildings tore through space at impossible speeds. They hit the first wave of cruisers before the Velker could even raise their shields. Ships that had survived 100 battles were torn apart in seconds. Evasive maneuvers. Thrax roared. All ships raised shields. But it was too late. The attack was coming from everywhere. Not just from the moon, but from asteroids. From space stations. From debris fields that the Velker had scanned and dismissed as worthless. Humanity had hidden weapons platforms throughout the entire system, and now they were all firing at once. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. In the first 3 minutes of the battle, the Velker had lost 400 ships. Impossible, Thrax whispered. This is impossible. But it was only the beginning. From behind the largest gas giant in the system, ships began to emerge. Not the 47 vessels that Galactic Intelligence had reported. Hundreds of ships, sleek and deadly, their hulls painted the color of deep space. They had been hiding there for months, waiting for this moment. Admiral Kang Suni watched the battle from her command ship, the Reunification. It was a carrier vessel, massive and heavily armored, carrying dozens of smaller attack craft in its belly. All wings launch, she ordered. Focus on their command ships. Cut off the head, and the body will die. Human fighters poured into space like angry hornets. They were smaller than Velker ships, faster and more agile. Their pilots had trained in virtual reality simulations for years, fighting this exact battle over and over until they could do it in their sleep. Lieutenant Han Jion was one of those pilots. She pushed her fighter to maximum speed, weaving through the chaos of the battle. Enemy fire filled the space around her, but she did not hesitate. She had been born for this. Target acquired, she announced. Heavy cruiser bearing 3 to 5. I'm going in. Her weapons locked onto the Velker ship's engine section. She fired. The shots punched through the alien shields like they were made of paper. The cruiser's engines exploded, leaving the ship drifting and helpless. Confirmed kill, she said, already searching for her next target. Moving to secondary objective, across the system, similar scenes played out. Human ships danced around their larger enemies, striking at weak points, exploiting gaps in formation. The Velker had never faced an enemy like this. Their tactics were designed for overwhelming force, not for fighting an opponent who refused to stand still. On the ground, the battle was even more brutal. Velker troops landed on New Busan, expecting terrified civilians. Instead, they found empty streets and silent buildings. The colonists had evacuated 2 underground shelters hours ago. What remained was a trap. Captain Baek Yoonji watched the enemy through a scope from a concealed position. Her unit was hidden in the wreckage of what appeared to be a destroyed building. In reality, every piece of debris was carefully placed, providing cover and firing positions. "Wait for my signal," she whispered into her communicator. The Velker advanced in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the pale sunlight. They were tall and terrifying, their bodies designed for war. Any normal enemy would have run at the sight of them. Yenji counted silently. 10, 9, 8. The Velker reached the kill zone, she said. The ground erupted. Hidden explosives tore through the alien formation. Before the survivors could react, human soldiers opened fire from every direction. The Velker had superior armor and weapons, but they had no cover and no time to organize. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, 300 Velker soldiers lay dead. Yunji's unit had lost 2. "Report to command," she ordered. "Enemy force neutralized." Moving to secondary position, she did not celebrate. There was no time. More Velker were landing every minute, and every position had to be defended. Back in space, Supreme Commander Thrax stared at his display in disbelief. His fleet was being destroyed. Not slowly, not gradually, but in real time. Ships vanished from his screen faster than he could process. "This cannot be happening," he said. "They were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to surrender." Thrax was dead, killed when a kinetic round had torn through the bridge. Half of Thrax's officers were dead or wounded. The flagship itself was damaged, its shields failing. Supreme Commander, a surviving officer, reported, "We have lost 2,000 ships. Enemy losses are minimal. We must retreat." Thrax wanted to refuse. He wanted to press forward, to crush these arrogant humans through sheer force of will. But he was not a fool. He could see the numbers. He could see the truth. Humanity had not been bluffing. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hollow, "fall back. Retreat to Dominion space." The Velker fleet turned and ran. Behind them, human ships gave chase, picking off stragglers. The weapons platforms continued to fire, destroying any vessel that moved too slowly. Admiral Kang watched the enemy retreat with grim satisfaction. It was not over yet. "But the first battle was won. Casualties?" she asked. 31 ships destroyed, her aide reported. Approximately 200 personnel lost. Ground forces report minimal losses across all colony worlds. 31 ships. 200 lives. It was a victory by any measure, but Kong did not smile. Every life lost was a tragedy. Every death was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," she said. "Inform them that the Velker invasion has been repelled. And tell them that humanity is ready to discuss peace." She paused. Real peace. Not surrender. The message went out across the galaxy. Within hours, every species knew what had happened. The young, weak, primitive humans had defeated the mighty Velker Dominion. They had hidden their true strength for 30 years, building in secret, preparing in silence. And now, the galaxy would have to deal with them as equals, in his quarters on the reunification. Ambassador Park Do-yan received the news. He sat alone, drinking tea from his old thermos. His hands were shaking slightly. The stress of the past days had taken its toll, but they had won. Humanity had survived. He thought about all the generations that had come before him. All the soldiers and scientists and ordinary people who had worked to build this moment. They had known that someday someone would come for humanity, and they had made sure humanity would be ready. "We remember," Dojin said quietly to the empty room. "We always remember." Outside, the stars burned cold and eternal, and among them, humanity had finally proven its place. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every known civilization crowded into the ancient room. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. Others had sent their highest officials. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Ambassador Park Do-yeon stood in the same spot where he had faced the council just 2 weeks ago, but everything was different now. The alien delegates no longer looked at him with pity or amusement. They looked at him with fear. Supreme Commander Thrax was present as well, though he no longer stood proud at the center of the chamber. He was bound in energy restraints, his armor stripped away, his body showing the wounds from the failed invasion. Half of his fleet was destroyed. His empire was in chaos. And now he faced judgment. High Counselor Vex addressed the assembly. "We are gathered to discuss the recent conflict between the Velker Dominion and the Human Federation. The evidence is clear. The Velker initiated an unprovoked invasion of human space. They were decisively defeated." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The word decisively echoed in 100 different languages. Ambassador Park Vex continued, "Humanity has requested this hearing. Please present your case." Do-yeon stepped forward. He still wore his simple suit. He still carried his thermos. But he no longer seemed small. He seemed like a man who had faced an empire and won. "Thank you, High Counselor," he said. His voice was calm and clear. 2 weeks ago, I stood in this chamber and warned the Council that humanity was prepared to defend itself. I was laughed at. I was dismissed. Supreme Commander Thrax promised to burn our worlds and teach us our place. He turned to face Thrax directly. "How did that work out for you, Supreme Commander?" Thrax said nothing. His sensors flickered weakly. Dojan continued. "The Velker Dominion lost over 2,000 warships in a single day. They lost tens of thousands of soldiers on the ground. Their invasion force was broken so completely that they fled back to their own space in shame." He paused to let the words sink in. "But this hearing is not about revenge. Humanity did not ask for this war. We do not want to destroy the Velker or anyone else. We simply want to live in peace." Elder Prism leaned forward. "Ambassador, forgive my bluntness, but after what we witnessed, many in this council are ... concerned. Humanity hid its true military capabilities for 30 years. You deceived the entire galaxy. How can we trust you now?" It was a fair question. Do-yeon had expected it. "Elder Prism," he said, "let me ask you something. In the 30 years since humanity joined the Federation, how many wars have we started?" Prism hesitated. "None." "How many species have we attacked?" "None." "How many territories have we claimed through force?" "None." Do-yeon nodded. "We built our defenses in secret because we knew this day would come. We knew that eventually someone would look at our worlds and decide to take them. But we never used those weapons offensively. We never threatened anyone. We simply prepared to defend ourselves." He turned back to the full council. "Humanity's history is violent. We do not hide from this truth. For thousands of years, we made war upon ourselves. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came close to ending our own civilization more than once." His voice grew heavier. "But we learned that war brings only suffering. We learned that true strength is not about conquest, but about protecting what matters. When we reached the stars, we made a choice. We would not repeat the mistakes of our past. We would not become conquerors." Admiral Kung Suni watched the broadcast from her ship, still positioned near New Busan. The cleanup operations were ongoing. Wrecked Velker ships had to be removed from orbit. Damaged colonies had to be repaired. The dead had to be honored. She listened to Do-yeon's words and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. He was speaking the truth. Humanity had changed, but the cost of that change had been terrible. Admiral Harade reported, "We've completed the casualty count. 217 military personnel killed. 43 civilians who couldn't reach shelters in time. Total wounded is over 1,000. 260 people. Fathers, mothers, children. Lives ended because the Velker had believed humanity was weak." "Notify the families," Kong said quietly. "Personally. I want every family to know that their loved ones died as heroes." On the colony of New Busan, Lieutenant Han Jiang helped with the reconstruction efforts. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. Buildings had been damaged. Infrastructure had been destroyed. The colonists were returning from their shelters, blinking in the sunlight, trying to understand what had happened. A little girl approached Jiang. She was maybe 7 years old, with dirt on her face and fear in her eyes. "Are the monsters gone?" she asked. That Jiang knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. "Yes," she said gently. "The monsters are gone. They won't come back. Promise?" Jiang hesitated. She could not promise that. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. Other threats would come eventually. "I promise that we'll always protect you," she said finally. "No matter what happens, we'll keep you safe." The girl seemed satisfied with this answer. She ran back to her parents, who were waiting nearby. The father nodded to Jiang in silent thanks. This was what they had fought for. Not glory. Not conquest. Just the chance for children to grow up without fear. Back at the council, the debate continued. Some delegates demanded that humanity be punished for its deception. Others argued that the Velker had brought their defeat upon themselves. A few even suggested that humanity should be expelled from the Federation entirely. But gradually, a different understanding began to emerge. "Consider the facts," said Ambassador Yun Saren of the Merchant Coalition, a minor power that had often traded with humans. Humanity had the capability to expand aggressively for decades. They chose not to. They could have conquered weaker species. They chose not to. Even now, after being attacked, they seek peace rather than revenge. She gestured toward Thrax. Compare this to the Velker, who have attacked dozens of species, enslaved millions, and shown no remorse for any of it. Which civilization should we really be afraid of? The question hung in the air. High Counselor Vex called for a vote. The council would decide 3 things. First, whether the Velker Dominion was guilty of illegal aggression. Second, what punishment they would receive. Third, how humanity's status in the Federation would change. The first vote was unanimous. Guilty. The second vote was nearly unanimous. The Velker would pay reparations to humanity. They would release all slaves in their territory. Supreme Commander Thrax would be tried for war crimes. The third vote was more complicated, but in the end, a clear majority emerged. Humanity would not be punished. Instead, they would be granted a permanent seat on the High Council. Their military capabilities would be acknowledged openly, and they would be treated as equals by every species in the Federation. Doyan received the news with quiet dignity. He bowed to the council and thanked them for their wisdom. But as he left the chamber, Elder Prism intercepted him. "Ambassador," the crystalline being said, "I must ask you something privately." Doyan nodded. "Of course. When you came to the council 2 weeks ago, you seemed so calm, so confident. Were you not afraid at all?" Doyan considered the question carefully. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Every moment of every day since I learned of the Velker threat, I was afraid. Afraid that our preparations would fail. Afraid that our people would die. Afraid that I would have to watch my civilization be destroyed." He smiled slightly. "But I could not show that fear. My job was to give our enemies doubt and our people hope. So I drank my tea and smiled and pretended that everything was under control. And if the Velker had called your bluff, if they had attacked before your defenses were ready," Doyan's smile faded. "Then we would have fought anyway, with sticks and stones if necessary. Humanity has never been good at surrendering. It's not in our nature." He bowed to Elder Prism and walked away, leaving the ancient being to contemplate what kind of species humanity truly was. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. humanity was not to be underestimated. But more importantly, humanity was not to be feared. They were survivors. Yes, they were warriors when necessary. But above all, they wanted peace. And they were willing to fight for it. 1 year had passed since the war that changed everything, Ambassador. Park Do-yeon sat on the porch of his small house. On the eastern coast of Korea, the morning sun was rising over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. He held a cup of tea in his hands, the same blend he had drunk in the council chamber on that fateful day. He was retired now. The galaxy had offered him countless honors, positions of power, and opportunities to shape interstellar politics. He had refused them all. He had done his part. It was time for younger people to carry the burden. A shuttle descended from the sky and landed on the beach near his house. Do-yeon was not surprised. He had been expecting this visitor. Elder Prism emerged from the shuttle, a crystalline form catching the morning light in beautiful patterns. The ancient being had traveled 12,000 light-years for this conversation. Ambassador Park Prism said, "I hope I am not disturbing you." Do-yeon gestured to an empty chair on the porch. "Please, sit. And call me Do-yeon. I am not an ambassador anymore." Prism settled into the chair awkwardly. Their species did not normally sit. "I wanted to thank you personally. The Velker have kept their word. The slaves are being freed. The reparations are being paid. And Supreme Commander Thrax will spend the rest of his life in prison."
Oh, yeah.
Do-yeon nodded. "Justice is important. But it is not enough on its own." Prism agreed. "It is not." They paused, their internal light flickering with what might have been uncertainty. "I also came to ask you something. A question that has troubled the Council for many months. Ask. Why did humanity not take revenge?" Do-yeon sipped his tea slowly before answering. "What do you mean? After you defeated the Velker fleet, you could have invaded their worlds. You could have destroyed their civilization. Many species in your position would have done exactly that. But you stopped. You accepted peace. Why?" The old man looked out at the ocean. Waves rolled against the shore in an eternal rhythm. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "A long time ago on this very planet, 2 nations fought a terrible war. One nation attacked the other without warning, destroying much of their fleet in a single morning. They believed they would win quickly. They were wrong." Prism listened in silence. "The war lasted years. Millions of people died. Cities were burned. And in the end, the nation that had been attacked developed the most terrible weapon ever created. A bomb that could destroy an entire city in a single flash." Do-yeon's voice grew heavy. "They used that bomb. Twice. And the war ended. But the people who had been attacked faced a choice. They could have destroyed their enemy completely. They could have taken revenge for every death, every atrocity, every crime. Instead, they chose to help rebuild. They chose peace." He turned to face Prism. "That choice was not weakness. It was strength. True strength is not about destruction. It is about knowing when to stop. It is about choosing a better future instead of clinging to the pain of the past." Prism was silent for a long moment. "Your species is very strange," they said finally. "You are capable of such violence, yet you choose peace. You have the power to dominate, yet you seek equality. I do not fully understand you." Do-yeon smiled. "We do not fully understand ourselves, but we try to be better. Every generation tries to be better than the one before. Sometimes we fail, but we never stop trying." Far away, on the colony world of New Busan, Lieutenant Han Jiang was being promoted to captain. The ceremony was small and simple, held in the same community center that had hidden an armory beneath its floors. Admiral Kong. Soon he pinned the new insignia on Jiang's uniform. "You fought well," Kong said. "You brought your people home safe. That is what matters most." Jiang stood at attention, but her eyes were bright with emotion. "Thank you, Admiral. I only did what I was trained to do." "No." Kong's voice was firm. "You did more than that. You showed courage under fire. You protected the innocent. You are exactly the kind of officer humanity needs." After the ceremony, Giang walked through the streets of the colony. The damage from the invasion had been repaired. New buildings had risen where old ones had fallen. Children played in the parks, their laughter filling the air. A little girl ran up to her. It was the same child who had asked about the monsters a year ago, Captain Jiang. The girl shouted, "Look what I drew." She held up a picture. It showed a woman in a uniform flying a spaceship through the stars. The woman had a big smile on her face. "That's you," the girl explained proudly. "You're protecting us from the monsters." Jiang felt tears forming in her eyes. She knelt down and hugged the child gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll always do my best." On the Velker homeworld, changes were happening as well. The old empire was falling apart. Without their military might, the Dominion could no longer hold its territories together. Some worlds declared independence. Others joined the Federation. A young Velker named Threx watched the changes with mixed feelings. He had been born after the war, raised on stories of Velker glory that now seemed hollow. His generation would have to build something new. "What do you think of the humans?" his teacher asked him one day. Threx considered the question carefully. "They are strong," he said, "but not cruel. They won the war and could have destroyed us. Instead, they offered peace." "Does that make them weak?" "No," Threx shook his head. "It makes them wise. Perhaps we can learn from them." The teacher said nothing, but there was hope in his eyes. Perhaps the next generation of Velker would be different. Perhaps they could break the cycle of violence and conquest that had defined their species for so long. Back on Earth, Admiral Kong Suni gave a speech at the memorial for those who had died in the war. The monument was a simple wall of names carved in stone that would last for centuries. 260 people gave their lives to protect our civilization, she said. Farmers and teachers, scientists and soldiers, parents and children. They did not seek glory. They did not want to be heroes. They simply wanted to keep their families safe. She paused, looking at the names. Today we honor their sacrifice. But we also make a promise. We promise to build a future worthy of their deaths. A future of peace and cooperation. A future where no child has to fear the monsters in the stars. The crowd was silent. Many were crying. But there was something else in their eyes as well. Pride, hope, determination. Humanity had been tested and had passed. Now, it was time to move forward. Elder Prism stayed with Doyan until sunset. They talked about history and philosophy, about war and peace, about the strange paths that different species had taken through the darkness of space. Finally, as the stars began to appear, Prism rose to leave. "I have one last question," they said. "In all your years of studying war, what is the most important lesson you have learned?" Doyan stood and walked to the edge of his porch. The ocean stretched before him, vast and ancient, unchanged by the wars of nations or the rise and fall of empires. "The most important lesson," he said quietly, "is that every war ends. No matter how terrible, no matter how long, eventually the fighting stops. And when it does, the survivors have to decide what comes next. Revenge or forgiveness. Hatred or healing. Destruction or rebuilding." He turned to face Prism. "Humanity has made both choices at different times in our history. We have sought revenge, and it has brought us nothing but more pain. We have sought forgiveness, and it has brought us peace." He smiled. "We are not perfect. We never will be. But we have learned that the choice for peace is always the harder path and always the better one." Prism bowed deeply. "Thank you, Doyan. I think I understand your species a little better now." "I hope so," Doyan replied, "because the galaxy is going to need us. All of us." Working together, he watched the shuttle rise into the sky and vanish among the stars. Then he returned to his chair, poured another cup of tea, and watched the night settle over the world he had helped to save. The galaxy had wanted to test humanity. Humanity had passed, and now finally they could rest.